We'll begin our review of Hilchos Chanukah today. The Rambam, in his presentation of Hilchos Chanukah, the first halacha discusses the historical background to the holiday that we call Chanukah. And there the Rambam stresses the point that there were real implications to the victory of the Chashmonaim over the Greeks. And he specifically states that Malchut, that kingship, returned to Yisrael for about 200 years, which was the time of the war until the destruction of the temple, about 200 years. And so it would seem that the Rambam, who knew the history very well, and who certainly knew that the history of the Malchut HaChashmonaim, the history of the kingship of the Chashmonaim, was not always glorious. Not always glorious politically, militarily, religiously, humanly. In fact, some of the chapters written by the descendants, by the Chashmonaim and their descendants, some of the kings of Israel, that reigned at that time, including Herod, who was known as being a wicked and unstable personality, were far from glorious. In fact, if we had a choice, we would probably opt to erase them from our history. Nevertheless, the Rambam said, Malchut, kingship, was returned to Israel. So it meant to me that for the Rambam, kingship, political independence, in some manner, being able to run your own governmental system, that's a meaningful thing for Klal Yisrael. And kingship is a word that describes political independence, that was meaningful. And so today we study the books of Shmuel and Melachim and Divrei Yamim, which present to us the history of the kings of Israel. Now, the kings of Israel were often people who are unpleasant, undevoted, unaccepting of the Torah and God's dictates. Nevertheless, we study the history of kingship in Israel, because political independence is necessary for Am Yisrael to reach the potential, or to activate the potential that is within them. It's something we strive for. It's something that we try to achieve. And so even when political independence implies wrong thinking, poor decision making, and maybe going to the left instead of going to the right, nevertheless, it gives us a framework which is positive in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when we say Hallel, we say the tefillot of Hallel on Chanukah. When we light the candles of Chanukah, of course we remind ourselves of the miracle of Chanukah, which was an extraordinary thing, but in itself may not deserve commemoration. For after all, the fact that God can make a little bit of oil last a long time doesn't seem to be revelatory about God. On the other hand, the fact that Malchut was reestablished in Yisrael, meaning from the time of the Churban Beit HaMikdash, at 586 BCE, until 135 approximately BC, hundreds of years passed, where Jews who lived in Eretz Yisrael did not have political independence. That reality, or that new situation, definitely deserves to be marked. So Chanukah is a commemoration of a victory. Chanukah is a commemoration of a miracle. Chanukah is a commemoration of the light from the Beit HaMikdash that started to shine forth. Chanukah is also a commemoration of about 200 years of kingship and political independence.